welcome to everyone who's here live with us today. I know that some people will be watching the replay of this, so welcome to you as well. Don't want to leave you out. I'm Rachel James. I'm the Director of Community at VCIOToolbox, and this is our first learning series of 2022. We had a break for the holidays, and now we are back. We do these once a month, and we always have a special guest with us from outside of our organization, which is always really fun. But before we get started, I want to share a couple of things with y'all to make sure you know about them. One is our MSP Customer Success Facebook group. We're building a community of owners, VCIOs, account managers, etc., to help each other learn and grow and create the best customer experience possible. Through that, we have 2 weekly education opportunities. You can also sign up through Zoom if you're not a big Facebook person. On Tuesdays, Brian Doyle, our co-founder, will walk you through different parts of the VCIOToolbox software and the tools at your disposal there, kind of breaking it down, showing you the best and most efficient ways to use the software. That's every Tuesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern.
That is correct.
And on Thursdays, like today at 10 a.m. Eastern, Brian and I hop in there and we choose different topics to talk about that help you drive account management momentum, up-level your client relationships, and provide increasingly greater value to your customers. We just finished a series talking about building the office of the VCIO. If you are interested in checking that out, you can go to our YouTube channel, the VCIO Toolbox YouTube channel, where all of the past coaching sessions from Tuesdays and from Thursdays are there, so you can get caught up. That, I think, is all of my little commercial bit. Today, we have a very special guest, Bill Stucklen.
Actually, if I can interject before you go there, Rachel, we do have a couple quick recent updates. I just want to bring anybody up to speed that is a VCIOToolbox customer today. We've had a lot of releases over the last couple weeks. We've actually released 3 times since last week in December. We've added a new customer dashboard into the meeting view. So if you haven't experienced that, please go take a look at it. We're looking for feedback to understand what data and what things you want to see more of in that customer dashboard as well. So, take a look, tell us where we need to do more. We've added to a request that we heard frequently was departmental and site budgets as well. So as you start working with clients that might have multiple property holdings or state and local governments that have different departments, we've taken that ability to take your overall roadmap now and actually build it into a departmental type framework. We've introduced Halo and Synchro as new integrations to the system. So now we've got the 5 major PSAs: Halo, Synchro, Kaseya, ConnectWise, and Autotask. If you haven't seen it yet, we've got a Kanban board as an alternate view for recommendations. And the big one for those account managers in our system, we've given you task management. So now, in addition to creating tickets and creating your recommendations from the system back into your PSAs, you can track your tasks and build your to-dos right in the system. And you could do that at the customer level, contact level, and at the recommendation level. So it really gives you that ability to kind of do those follow-ups. And when you're working in our interactive meeting mode, be able to capture those takeaways. So I apologize, Rachel, for cutting in, but those are some of the updates from the system. I'll wet your guys' whistle a little bit. We got another release coming out next week, and we're overhauling the NIST assessments and really tying the scoring to things that you need, including the supplier performance reporting requirements that you might have if you're a NIST 800-171 bound vendor. And we're going to be adding 2-way sync on ConnectWise opportunities, so we can actually start bringing actual costs in and set ourselves up to adding budget versus variance into our customer dashboards as well. So I don't want to take any more time away from Bill, but I did want to make sure the community knew some of the things that we're up to in case they haven't seen those emails that we blast out probably way too much to everybody.
Great. No, thank you, Brian. I'm so glad you jumped in because I completely forgot about that. And that is important. So now would like to welcome Bill Stucklen, co-founder and CEO of Stack Advisors, also MSP Toolshed. Stack Advisors is an MSP-focused agency and automation powerhouse that works to enhance every stack through collaboration, innovation, and powerful automations. So we're going to talk about profiting through automation, identifying automation areas of opportunity, and then implementing it to drive profit through efficiency, scalability, and client retention. And before I hand it over, real quick, everyone who's here with us live, if you have a question that comes up while we are doing this, feel free to raise your hand or pop it into the Q&A. I will have my eyes on that, and I'll make sure that your question is heard. And I think that's it, Brian and Bill, if you want to take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Bill. I appreciate you joining us today. And, I'm excited to hear a little bit more about how automation can help us in the MSP world. I'm sure, as things are changing for us as the MSPs. We're certainly getting past the break fix times. I mean, that's been going away for quite a while. But if you listen to what the analysts are saying out there, it's all about trusted advisory going here. And I hate the cliche term trusted advisor, but it's reality, right? We really need to be helping our customers with advisory and automation. Now, MSPs are really keyed in on the advisory side. Everybody's building up that MSSP stack, but I think automation is still a little bit of a mystery. We're really good at automating ourselves, or at least trying to, but not as good at identifying where there's pockets of opportunity within the customer environment. So I was fortunate enough to have our guest today, Bill, on our MSP Business School podcast. So I got a little bit of a preview, but that was a couple months ago. So I'm sure plenty has changed, more to come. So with that, Bill, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Maybe share with everybody a little bit about your background so they know who they're talking to.
Sure. For the few people that had popped on early enough, I got my start in IT doing tech support for Doom, the video game, back in the early 90s. And that's really what started to kind of launch me down the path of really finding a place and growing in the IT space. I had moved to New York City, and I spent a lot of time working various tech support jobs, and then the .com world showed up, and bounced around a lot of .coms and really honed my skills in, focused really about providing IT services to the .com itself, right? And they very much were, at the time, a lot of the structures of those were created to be almost like an MSP within the company, right? A lot of different divisions. And so when the .com bubble burst and collapsed, someone that I was working with who ended up becoming my business partner, he and I started an IT service firm 2002. And in 2005, we were fortunate enough to meet a few people that ran around in this little piece of software called ConnectWise. And this idea of an MSP and doing flat fee services and trying to have predictive revenue and all these things sounded very interesting. And that's really how we got involved in the MSP space very early on. And from there, we became power users of ConnectWise. And really our DNA was about automation. And I know we spoke about this previously, Brian, but to us, we were in New York. It was a very expensive labor market. A lot of people had gone either back to school or left after the .coms. And so we found at least for us, automation was a way for us to be able to be scalable, to increase revenue, to grow our client base without having to hire a lot of expensive resources. And so from that point, really, put us down a path of doing the most we could with the tool set. And in 2011, we took all of those skills and started Stack Advisors out of our MSP. We ended up selling our MSP. We grew it to about 65 people when we sold it in 2015. And we had been doing Stack Advisors, and that really became my focus full on. So we just celebrated 10 years. Into last year was 10 years as Stack Advisors. And the whole premise was really about helping MSPs use the ConnectWise platform, use the various tools that tie into that ConnectWise platform. And automation has always been a big part of that conversation. And as we spoke last fall, it's something that doesn't just move an MSP towards being proactive, but the reality is that it can drive profit, which is what, I know we want to talk a bit about today, is like, how is automation not just about saving time? Yeah. Right? How does automation allow you to actually drive profit? And you mentioned it early on, Brian, that a lot of MSPs do what they can to automate their own tool set, and that's a start, right? And I think that, one of the things I like to talk about is creating an automation culture, and we can get into that a little bit today. But once you have automation ingrained internally as an MSP, you can then start to bring that out to your clients. And the fact is automation doesn't just save time, right? Or just remove that repetitive process. That's a piece of it. But the reality is that it can drive profit and should be at the core of what every MSP provides as part of their services.
Yeah, and I think you've really, hit upon it. I think we all looked at automation initially as just really a time saver, right? How do we build some processes that can help us respond quicker, especially here in the MSP world, where we tend to be one resource heavy or one resource light almost all the time, right? As we're going through our growth trajectory. So, it really became about how do we make sure that we're doing things efficiently as possible. But I think, and I know this is what we're going to zero in today, it offers such a huge opportunity. And why are we not having more conversations around that with our customers today, right? There was a period of time, and I'll be guilty of saying that this was a big part of my MSP career. We almost ignored the line of business application, right? We were like, hey, we're the security guys, the infrastructure guys, the plumbing guys. And when those applications were due for an upgrade, we were hoping we were going to sell a server to go with it, right? But we really didn't look at workflow and automation. And now as we're moving forward and we're really elevating our games to really be that executive leader to our customers, well, this needs to be a key part of our conversation. I'm sure you'd agree. So, but if we're going to have those conversations, how do we turn that back into revenue for our businesses?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important to look at. And when we talk about the profit, there's really two pieces of it, right? We can't, as a VCIO, as that trusted advisor, right? We can't go into a client and talk about ways that they can save and be profitable and be efficient through automation if we're not doing it ourselves. And that was really something that we, again, as an MSP, and why we started Stack and why we've created a tool like MSP Toolshed is about easing that, that onboarding. And there's sort of 4 areas that I like to look at, and that's the efficiency. And yep, it's going to save you time. It's going to remove the repetitive nature of the service delivery, but it's also going to streamline your process. And by streamlining your process and by, making those repetitive pieces almost, automatic, that's going to give you the ability to scale. And to scale, those processes, those systems need to allow for that one-to-many. And that, is something that certainly resonates. Anybody that creates software or does any kind of custom software, you understand that, hey, one-to-one software is great, but if you can do one-to-many and you can bring that out, you can bring that growth, that allows you to scale without having to add a whole bunch of resources to support that scaling. And I'm not trying to say that automation is going to allow you to support 100 clients with a single person. It's not going to work quite that well, but what it is going to do, and what's important that we try to encourage, both our clients at Stack as well as what we did as an MSP, is that when you have those big upticks in growth, is that it's not the sudden growing pain. I got to hire somebody for last week, right? I have the ability to be a little more predictive about it. And, we learned early on in those days transitioning from time and material to, fixed fee, hey, we need to be able to add clients without suddenly having to go find and hire resources that may not even be available. And obviously something we deal with a lot today.
Yeah, right? That job market is competitive, challenging, and tough to find some killer resources.
It is really, really brutal. Yeah, very brutal.
And you're right out there in New York City, as is Rachel. You'd think we'd be able to find some people there, but I mean, it's getting tough to, in some of the rural communities, you really are experiencing this as well.
Well, yeah, and I think that the fact of remote work is certainly more possible, and I think the pandemic certainly made that much more acceptable across the board. There's a whole set of challenges around that maybe we could talk about some other time. We're fully remote, and we've been that way since we started. But it's difficult, even remote, to find people. And part of that rolls into really my 4th point, which is that consistency. Is that if you're automating, you're delivering a consistent service. And it allows you to onboard somebody new, right? Or to move and shift people around because that process and that automation is there to really drive. And that consistency. And the consistency is what not only supports the scalability, but it does it by, retention. right? And client retention, because if you're delivering consistent service and you have even a small amount of time to continue to improve your process and your service delivery, that's going to make clients stick around. And one of the things I've always talked about is, hey, the tools that we use, the clients don't care anymore. And it's no longer, hey, we're using, ConnectWise, and we're using, Datto, and we are the best because we're using the best tools. Everybody's using the best tools these days. And so it's about that consistent delivery of service that's going to allow your clients and make your clients stick around because they're happy.
And honestly, that's a good thing, right? Because the tools are just a level playing field that we can all participate in if we're willing to write the check. But at the end of the day, we have to build the process that our customers are going to fall in love with and really generate that experience. And certainly automation can help us from missing things, right? That's always the big worry. Did I do everything I was supposed to do? Now, Bill, before we dive a little bit more into automation, maybe share with everybody a little bit of the difference. I think we've really got a good understanding now from what you shared about Stack Advisors really kind of being a ConnectWise workflow, really business process automation when you think about it at a much bigger picture versus what MSP Toolshed does.
Sure. And so MSP Toolshed is something that we created to automate the process around machine deployments. And this is certainly something that we struggled with as an MSP. In fact, I tell the story that we used to have a whole workbench of interns, and we had a really robust internship program. And your first week or your first 2 weeks, and if you were struggling, maybe your first month, was on the bench and clicking next to go through those machine deployments. And we tried to leverage our RMM tool. We went through a few of them at the time. We ended up settling in around LabTech, ConnectWise Automate. We started to do some scripts, but there was still a lot of triggers that needed to be done around it. And every client needed to have something separate, maybe even multiple machine setups in there. And so that was it's a very complex process. And what we've done, and again, part of our DNA is around automating, is we said, hey, we have this skill set being in the ConnectWise ecosystem. We've created, a company that provides these services for MSPs. Well, let's hone in and use the development and the integration skills we have from doing a lot of these integrations for other companies. Let's make our own product. Let's create a SaaS product, and let's find something that is a complex process that we can automate, and we can automate in a way that's going to allow it to be custom. So it's a subset, I think, Brian, of what we're talking about when we look at automating overall process, but it's a really complex problem. And it's something that we certainly recognize as an MSP, but we also had a lot of our clients that leveraged our consulting services around Stack. That was one of the big questions we had for years. How do I automate my onboarding process? And we can touch on process automation, or RPA, as it's coming in. And I think I got some of that in the slide down the road here. But it is really about automating across the tool set. And that's part of what MSP Toolshed is about, is an actual tool to do something larger.
And let's talk about the profitability piece here, right? So I think you recall when we were on, on the podcast together, I shared with you a particular project that I had in the past, and I'm just going to outline it real quick, and then I want you to tell me what that might have cost me with you, right? So we were doing a PC. This was back when it was Windows XP to Windows 7 upgrades. Okay. So, 5-6 years ago, maybe 7 at this point. I lose a little bit of track of time. But we had a 3,500 PC customer, and we had to do all of these at night. So I had a SWAT team of 11 people working at night, and I couldn't go any bigger than that because they needed to be accompanied by somebody to go into every one of these offices. So there was a double cost really for the customer, because they had us and they had their own personnel making sure my people were doing what they were supposed to do. We had to buy, basically an image-based or, a PC moving type software. It was $25 a license for those 3,500 machines. So before I even factored in my cost of labor, I had an $87,500 bill that I had to take care of. And all that automation really allowed me to do was gather the image from one side and move it to the other side. I still needed somebody there to push the buttons. I still needed to be on site to do it, because if it didn't get started right, it wouldn't kind of finish right. As you can imagine and start putting your math together, this was quite a nice contract for us, because it was well into the 300, 400,000s. Now, your product, if I understand, and I'm not meaning to make this a commercial, guys, but I really want to illustrate the point of how automation really can help. Your tool helps with that process. What's your entry point?
So our base plan probably wouldn't have worked for this one.
No, but
149 a month, right? And even on the high plan, it certainly would have been probably the 399, and that's really unlimited right now. So you could have avoided 25
well,
bucks.
I mean, that's my point is, look, technology evolves, and as we know, costs generally come down to a point,
sure.
but these projects that were once very expensive can now be done less, but the customer still expects a certain cost to be associated with it, right? Yeah. And as a result of that, that really means that you get an opportunity potentially to put more of that money back in your pocket. So that's where I really wanted to circle it back to profit. You don't have to give back every one of those dollars.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and that's something that we try to educate people on, because we all have expenses in the business that we can't bill back, right? Like this isn't a widget that you can then turn around and mark up for your client. But what it will do is, in your scenario, Brian, it would have allowed maybe instead of 11 techs, you could have had 5 techs.
Yeah.
Right. And you could have, because they can start the process, the automation piece around it. And I used to say automation is going to save you time, right? The fact is it's not. Well, it's going to save you time, but it's not the key. It's about that profit that you can bring to it, because the client does not understand the complexity of the scenario. And if you have a tool that can take a lot of that complexity at a low cost, even if it's a higher cost, there's the ability that automation allows you to save so much time from those resources, that those resources are billable and you can use them for that higher level billable at the same time.
Well, automation is almost the equivalent of that, running gag that we have in the IT sector where, we say all the time, you're not paying me for the time it takes me to do the work. You're not, that hourly pay is not about the fact that I can get it done in an hour. The reason you're paying me a fixed fees for the 20 years that it took me to learn how to do it in an hour, right? So, it's the same thing with automation. We're using tools which still need to be set up, scaled. There's a whole process to getting them off the ground to be efficient, right? That carries a cost before the revenue. But once you get there, you got to take some of that cost back through increasing your profits and letting the tool do some of those things. And you can still pass along the savings to the customer, giving them, a bit of a win-win scenario, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the things that we did as an MSP is we started to charge for machine setups, right? We used to do it for free, and then we're like, man, we're getting killed because it would take us 4 hours to do these, setups. So we automated as much as we could, but we still charge that same $450. Now, I could even bring that price down if I wanted to. If I'm an MSP and I'm using automation, I could bring that price down and pass on some savings, quote unquote savings, to my client, but still have a much higher margin on doing the same thing that I used to do manually. And that's where really, to me, it's a challenge to change that conversation. Automation is not about time saving; it's about driving profit.
Yep. And you also just shared something that one shows a little bit of our age, but two really talks about how the industry changes over time, because it was pretty commonplace to include the implementation with the PCs, because we used to get $2,000-$3,000 for a PC setup at 30 points, so there was actually money to use at that. Now we all know margins are, you're lucky to get 2 points, 3 points sometimes on a PC. You can't give away anything, right? But if you can automate it and make it a win-win, boom, we're helping both sides of the equation.
Yeah. And this, there's some other advantages of something like this where, clients want to order their own machines, or they have a deal, or they have somebody that works for, they're buying their own machines. You're still expected as an MSP to set those up and own those machines. And if, you get something and somebody sets it up on their own or says, yeah, I'm installing the things you ask, it now makes it a lot more difficult. So there's that whole other back end savings of actually having to support the machines that maybe you didn't even set up in the first place.
No doubt, So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about where some of the automation opportunities exist for the MSP today.
Absolutely. And I've done a couple breakouts, IT Nation, around this, and so I really kind of want to summarize what I see here. And there's really 3 steps that are good for MSPs to look at when they start to create an automation culture, which I talked about. You want to identify the gaps. You want to create that automation culture. You want to look at implementing the solution. a lot of times we get heads down, right? And we get so focused on the tasks. A lot of times engineers tend to get, they become a subject matter expert on one specific thing or a few specific things because they really get their heads down. And so it's important sometimes to not get lost in that little minutia, but step back and go, where is it, right? Like I say, pick your head up, look at the bigger picture to try to understand what are all these moving pieces and what are areas that are tedious. And another great way to identify that is that documentation. And we all hate documentation. It's miserable. I think there's a lot of us that have to be responsible for it, that have some really choice words when we're trying to do documentation. The truth is, and this is what really helped us scale as an MSP, and I think, Brian, was really helps your clients when they provide, these services, is that you have to have that documentation. And once you get through it, then modifying it is not as tedious as that first step. It's also really, really critical that that documented process is a roadmap for the automation. And one of the things that we've talked about, with our clients at Stack is, hey, if you don't know how you deliver a service, and then you come to us to ask us to create process automation for you, we're going to have to go figure that out. And maybe we don't know exactly how you do it or the needs of your specific clients, because it starts to get down so many layers. So having that documented process makes automation both internally, as well as then, looking out, having either a service do it or going to your clients as an MSP and saying, hey, let's see your process. It's so key to being able to identify what to actually automate and the steps to do it, right? It saves that discovery. And the last one is data, and this is one of my favorite little slides here. I'd lie if I said I didn't have fun like creating this one with the marbles, but this was something that really came from an inherent issue that we had early on as an MSP, right? We didn't categorize any of our data. We weren't tracking it. We weren't doing analytics. I think the term VCIO was still very foreign in the MSP space, and it was really difficult for us as an organization to be able to say, hey, what is it that we're spending time on? And so if you just want to click through this, Brian, what I like to equate it to is a box of marbles, right? And if you have a big box of marbles, and if every marble represents a service ticket, you've got all these tickets. And this is absolutely something that we always see when somebody comes to us and says, we want to do, we want to automate, we need to figure out how to automate just our internal stuff, just our service tickets. I say, well, where are you spending your time? Well, I don't know. I have, one service board and it's got 5,000 tickets on it, and I don't know what to do with those tickets. So the first thing I say is, okay, organize them, right? Do some simple categories. Take that box of marbles and start to put them in, like in this example, right? Starting to sort by color. Well, if you click through the next few here, once you do this, you can then start to really distill down. And you can start to say, well, not only do I have, blue marbles, but now I have dark blue marbles. I have, light blue marbles. I maybe have marbles with a little bit of green and white in there. And you can really start to distill down and see very closely where it is you're spending your time, what it is that's taking your most time. And that's an immediate place to start to look for automation opportunities. And the other side of that, and I think very relevant to the folks that you help, Brian, is that it also gives you that opportunity to go have a conversation with the client. If you see something that client is missing, and this is where that trusted advisor piece comes in. We started to see a client of ours that had a huge volume of tickets. We didn't, it was a lot of tickets. We almost had to have a dedicated tech on there. As we distilled down in our MSP, and started to hone in on what these are, and not just, oh, this is a help desk ticket, right? This is a software issue. Well, this is a software issue, and this is a software issue specific to Microsoft Office. We realized they didn't know how to use the new versions of Microsoft Office. Yeah. So we went and provided free training. We talked to the operations manager, CEO, and said, look, you guys have a ton of tickets in here, and it's clear you guys don't know how to use the tools. So we went trusted advisor and did free training for them on Microsoft Office, and that ticket volume reduced by probably 80% within a month. And we did it free because we knew we were going to have more margin on that client if we trained the people on how to actually use the software they were using on a day-to-day basis.
Let's kind of dig into that too, because what I see when that comes down to is it's the opportunity to bring innovation to bear too, right? One of our responsibilities is to help our customers move the needle forward. When people come to us about our platform, I always say it's all about business to technology alignment as much as it is about the contract compliance and are we doing what we're supposed to do and where are the gaps in the system. We need to understand where they want to improve. And if we don't do that, we're doing a disservice, right? When we're building out our technology roadmap, if it just exclusively is focused on refreshing what we have today, and we're not looking at how that refresh might not be a like for like refresh. Think about just the cloud, right? We stopped doing Exchange servers. We started moving things up into the cloud. It changed our business model exponentially, but it also changed how we worked with our client in the teachings that we could do there. So when I look at automation, especially when we look at the next generation of services that we can do, not only does it offer an opportunity to talk at a higher level with our customers, but it will help them innovate and move forward. And if we can help them innovate and move forward, of course, as an MSP, we're sticky now, right? We're controlling their budget on the one side, we're doing our regular road mapping, but now we're actually making them a better organization in a way that they can feel, see, and kind of touch, where a lot of what we did before was kind of behind the scenes. And that's why the curse of the great MSP would hit us. The more we automated, the more we did remotely, the less we're on site, the less things break, and our value gets called into question.
And I think that last sentence there, right? That QBR, let's go prove our value. It shouldn't be that, right? It should be, here's all the tickets, but look at where these things fall. Look at what we did. Oh, by the way, here are all the things that we used to charge for that we're now automating, right? And we always tell people, anything you automate, associate a time with it. And I know it's fuzzy, right? Oh, well, we would have done this manually. Well, no, we probably wouldn't have done it manually because we wouldn't have had the time to do it. But you start to calculate and capture that stuff, and that QBR becomes less about, hey, we're still really worth it, and more about, here's some stats, here's where we see some gaps in your usage of the tools, and here's where we think we can continue to help and improve you as a business, as our client.
And these are win-win conversations that elevate us from that operational seat, that commodity viewpoint, and really put us into that true leadership standpoint. And, I challenge the folks that, work with us here at MSP all the time. Learn how you can take the company to the next level. Understand what their biggest, hairiest problem is, even if you don't think it has anything to do with technology. I bet you under the covers, there's at least a technology contributor. So let's go seek that stuff out. So, let's now maybe cut into what is, an automation culture, and what are some of the, I'm seeing some of the characteristics here, but tell me how can I instill that in my team? And what does that really mean? Are people walking around with t-shirts that just say automation on the front, or,
right?
How do we get there?
Yeah, so it is certainly a challenge, and it's something that it's not easy to create, because you got to get the buy-in, right? And getting buy-in is one of the big challenges I think that a lot of MSPs have, because techs get so focused on day to day, or I got all this stuff I got to get through so I can go home and do my gaming, right? There's just so much around there. So creating an automation culture really is about supporting the effort, right? That's one of the first key things. Give people a space to innovate. Give them time, give them the tools to do it, right? Focus somebody around that. Allow them to embrace the automation. We like to call it our secret weapon. And so a lot of times people go, oh, you're bringing in this company that's going to automate stuff, which means that my job as the level 2 engineer is going to go away because you're going to automate the whole thing. And it's the opposite of that, right? We want to make those guys look like heroes, right? Level 1, 2, 3, and up. They should look like heroes because they can focus and spend the time on the actual things that are challenging instead of the things that are mundane. And so, there's the piece of rewards. And by rewards, I don't mean just saying, hey guys, look, you got all this stuff done. You have to incentivize people to adopt this culture, right? Public recognition is huge. Having a visual dashboard that shows the automation and the effectiveness of automation is really, really important as well, because it's now going to allow them to see how it's changing their jobs, not taking away their jobs. And when they see that and they start to, you go, hey guys, we used to do, 100 tickets a week about this mundane thing that we've now automated. Well, look, nobody's doing these tickets anymore. Isn't that a great thing? It's about reinforcing that, changing that culture, rewarding it, and that's going to create a happy team, because, you know, the dancing team there, right? Because they're going to start to realize, hey, I now have time to either interact with clients, and we got to be real, not every engineer wants to actually talk with clients at all. Fine, maybe he's the ideal guy for the automation engineer, but it's going to allow them to spend time and not feel rushed, not have to jump off a call, and it all rolls back up to client retention, scalability, and profitability. And so the creation of the culture, it's not easy. You've got to stay with it, right? It doesn't have to be a full-time focus, but it is really important to continue to support that and make a team happy.
Bill, I'm smiling so much over here right now because I'm thinking about something in my past, and I was blessed in this sense. I had a person I brought on. So, you know, for those of you that have been around the MSP world for a while, I used to use a tool called Silverback, and we used to monitor servers for, you know, only $200 an agent per year, just to put it into context. So I reached a certain critical mass where I said, hey, I brought in a guy that I knew was working at a local, if any of you remember Perimeter Security back in the day, who did a lot of banks and credit unions from a firewall standpoint and managed services. You know, asked him, what are you guys doing for tools? And he said they were building some open source tools. So first thing is, I had no clue what open source tools were, and I couldn't wrap my head as a capitalist pig around the concept of software that's being given away for free, right? And then we can take it and cobble something else. But really where I was going and why I was really smiling is this particular resource also was an early stage DevOps guy. And he looked at me and said, yeah, well, I'm you know, my goal is to automate myself out of a job. And of course, I'm already not understanding open source at this stage. And now you're telling me you want to eliminate your job. And I said, well, that seems so totally counterintuitive, Mike. You know what, if you do this, you'll be gone. He goes, no, you're always going to find something else for me to automate. Trust me. And that's really kind of what started that process for me. And you see, obviously, you know, DevOps and all that moved away from it, but it's a way you can start thinking more innovatively if you really look at it and say, hey, there's no end game. And you can share with your techs, there's no end game. And you can also look at your techs and go, this is so we can get more high value out of you, right? So, you know, I would even suggest for those listening, look at your utilization reports. None of your techs are 100% utilized, right? So give them the old Google challenge. Hey, use 10% of your free time. Let's identify what that is per week based on your utilization, and come tell me where we can do better. Explore where we can do better. Explore where we can, you know, change the processes we're doing, whether it's manual or automation, and make things better. To me, it's a good return on investment for the time you're paying that you're not getting anything back anyway, realistically, right? So, you know, these are things, at least, you know, we employed in my MSP once we kind of got a little bit of a handle around it, to say, how do we stay a little bit ahead of the curve and stay innovative?
Yeah, and I think that's a really great example. You know, is you know, we used to always say, oh, we're here to put ourselves out of work, and the fact is that it's always changing. You know, I like to look back at the days of, you know, we used to do tape backup, and why did we do tape backup? Because people started to store data locally. So we do tape backup. Well, now we got to figure out a way to get those tapes offsite in case the whole building goes, right? And then we said, well, there's a better way. We're going to put all your data up in this thing called the cloud. Oh, I don't know, or the data center,
Moore's
right?
law exceeded.
You know, it went from backup to backup and disaster recovery, and then it went to, well, it's all going to live in the cloud and be distributed around the world, and you know, all that. It's all that evolution, right? Just like it used to be antivirus software, and then it's now security software, and now it's a suite of security software. It's that evolution, and in every one of those steps, there's automation, and you replace the technology. As great as tools are these days, you still have to go back and automate it. And if you have that mindset, that automation culture and that mindset, as technology changes, as you adapt, as you are able to start to look at your clients and how to help automate your clients, that automation culture is just going to bleed through from the ground up.
Nope. Hurrah.
And there it is.
So yeah, so break this down for us. You look like got a little blueprint here that we can all follow.
I would say, yeah. So I've done this breakout around these, and this is really something that's kind of developed when we talk to a client about how to, you know, not just build that automation culture, right? But where do you start to, what are the areas that you focus on, I guess would be the best way to put it, right? The first thing is the right people. And you can't take somebody that is really great at customer service, but maybe not so great technical, right? You don't want to take, say, a dispatch. A lot of times we see people try, oh, my dispatcher is going to work on automation. Actually, a dispatcher should probably be really good about identifying areas for automation and making sure that your clients are taken care of, right? Find the person that likes to tinker. Find the person that goes home at night and, builds things, right? Or has servers at their own home, or says, oh, I've got this side project, right? I mean, my kids very much into Minecraft again, right? It's making a resurgence. What's Minecraft about? It's about building things, about tinkering. It's about, tweaking and automating. That's the right people. And you can create that, you can pull that out. But when you go to hire, what we always would do at our MSP when we started to recognize the power of having an automation mindset and automation culture was those people that would tinker, right? Those were the people that would be great to do it. I mentioned documentation, right? That solid documentation is so key to identifying those pieces as far as what you can automate in your process. The great data, the box of marbles, right? That is about what is it we are spending the most time on, right? And it's either maybe something that we do regularly, or maybe it's something that the client needs. Great way to find that. Automation engagement is about getting your team engaged, right? These are doing things like having a scriptathon, adding something in your PSA that says automation opportunity, running reports, setting aside that time to actually talk about things that they're identifying in your service delivery to automate. And then you can carry that down again to find ways to help your client automate, which will drive their profit, which will drive your profit, right? Dedicated resource, which I know is not always possible. A lot of times when we engage, one of the first questions we ask is, do you have an automation engineer? And this is a technical person. This is somebody that can actually create the automation, shouldn't necessarily be locked into one tool set, but having a dedicated resource, I think can allow an MSP, it's a weird investment, like, oh, I need somebody that's going to be billable as well. I heard a podcast, and I was probably at this point about 1.5 years ago, where someone said they got a 10x ROI on the automation engineer. And so if they had paid that automation engineer $80,000, they've equated that to $800,000 worth of revenue that it drove. That's a huge return. And so it's weird investment. In having a dedicated resource, you can start maybe, partially, but the return on this is huge. And especially when we talk about process automation and the RPA and across the tools, it becomes really valuable. And then the last piece is that iterative automation. You can't automate and let it go. Like we talked about, going from backup to backup and disaster recovery and security software and all that. It is iterative. And you have to continue to spend time on it, whether that's dedicated resource, third party, whatever it is. It's so important. Technology changes and the automation around it changes.
So it sounds like a couple things here. It sounds like it's probably good to have almost like an agile framework mentality as you're going into these things, because it's just really, you got to keep that iteration moving. You got to keep looking at things and say, okay, we've put it out there. How can we improve upon it before we say that it's done? I want to take a step back, though, to the dedicated resources. Sure. So something I'm encountering more and more as I'm working with the MSP community is a lot of them have dedicated PSA administrators now. Can that PSA administrator do a double role as a dedicated automation resource, only given the fact that a lot of that automation is tied there? Or are you really saying that, no, that should be a straight up person just focused on automation?
I think a PSA resource could do that if there's enough technical knowledge to dip into the RMM and into other tools, because we know now it's not just the RMM that's part of all of your monitoring. There's a lot of other tools now that you need to monitor, especially from the security landscape. The PSA, to me, is a great place to automate, because you're pulling all that data into a central location, and now you can automate around that data, especially if you have it categorized properly, right? You have it organized well. So I think that it's probably a good step. The only challenge I would say is that, is that person able to guide somebody when it gets to a more technical level, right? Is it something that they could, drive an RMM engineer to do? Can they manage that process? And not necessarily the person, but manage that process. But yeah, I think that's a great example. A PSA admin they should already be doing automation without maybe even realizing.
It should have some of the scripting capability, some of the resources that can be used across. But, now that I'm listening to you, I can also see where a lot of those folks do know how, they are administrators. They're not necessarily engineers, and there can definitely be some challenges once you get down to that RMM layer, and certainly the security tools where there's just gobs of data that is coming in, and you got to figure out how to synthesize that as well.
I think collaboration is key. It's why, companies hire people like us, is there is a subject matter expertise. And, like with my team, I have people that know all of these products, but not all of them know all of the products. So it's really important to have that expertise and that collaboration, and again, you're not going to dump all of these resources on automation. Right? It's that iterative process. Start and you'll see, hey, I've got momentum on this. It's going to lead to other things. And so, again, whether that's that when you go to roll this out, very poignant that you popped up this slide here, right? To implement that resource, have a point person. Like a lot of times, we'll say, look, you don't have to have an automation engineer, but we need a point person. Very similar, I think, to the way that MSPs, when they're providing, CIO services, they're not going to go talk to the whole company about it. They need a point person at that end client to really focus and say, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the strategy. Let's talk about, your life cycle. Let's talk about all of these pieces. It's the same thing, I think, that we look at. Have somebody that owns it internally, that can be part of that conversation, right? And make sure you give them time, right? Dedicate that time to allow them to brainstorm, to check in, to look, how are things working? The other piece here, one of the things I always recommend to people when they start to find that automation, don't deploy something across your entire client base at the same time. Do a phased rollout testing, right? You referenced, Brian, the agile method, and this very much is what we do. It's what we did at our MSP. Let's iterate, right? Let's do a phased rollout, a small rollout, track those results. Find out what worked, what didn't work, find those, those catches, right? Same thing that we did when we were creating MSP Toolshed. What were the things that stopped the deployment process? And let's continue to build and again, iterate on that. Test it, run it, fix it, test it, run it, fix it, test it, run it, fix it over and over. And so it may seem like a lot to try to roll out from an automation standpoint, but I think if people step back, look at what it is that they, what it is they're delivering and where that time is being spent, I think they'll find that they may even be automating more than they know, but they'll also identify very easily places to automate.
Terrific. So we're getting near the end of our hour, and I definitely want to make sure we leave up some time for some Q&A. So maybe we can close with just, what is the future of process automation? We've kind of touched upon it throughout our conversation here, but maybe if you wouldn't mind summarizing where you see some really good opportunity that an MSP can capitalize right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll do my best. This gets me really worked up. So I'll do my best to be cool about it, right? So the term, process automation, or you may see, from the enterprise world, RPA, robotic process automation. There's major companies doing it. A lot of these folks are pushing into the MSP space. There's even a couple brand new sort of companies by MSP veterans that are looking to do this. And it's something that I get, again, very worked up about. Process automation is not just about scripting, right? It's not just about doing some PowerShell or stringing together PowerShell commands. Process automation is really about the process, and it's about taking those things that people have to do that will allow them freedom to do other things, right? That complex process goes across multiple tools, right? Like we mentioned with MSP Toolshed, it's a great example of it because it goes across multiple tools, bringing together and automating a larger process to solve a complex problem. And it uses the diversity around APIs. And I think, Brian, we talked about this in the past, there's automation in all of these tools, but there's not automation across these tools. Yeah. And that is really where I look at what process automation is. And, the term may be an enterprise term, but it's coming to the MSP space. And it's something MSPs are going to need to pay attention to and solve, because I promise there will be big vendors and VC-driven organizations. There's one out there already that's focused in the Mac world, but they are doing this RPA, quote unquote, AI-driven a tool set that automates across their client base. And it's consistent and it's easy and it's inexpensive for them to provide. And that's coming, and MSPs have to pay attention to that. MSP Toolshed is a very good example of taking that complex problem and, you know, the process automation around something that's going to apply across the board.
Beautiful. So, you know, for all you attending, you see right down there, you do have the opportunity to get a demo of MSP Toolshed if you choose.
Live interactive demos. Yep, they're great. The guys
love
are
those.
Fantastic. So yeah.
Big fans of that over here as well. But msptoolshed.com/demo. So with that, I'm going to drop the screen for a moment and open up the floor for any Q&A we may have. Rachel, I don't know if you saw any questions coming in while we were chatting, but
not today. It's been a little quiet on the Q&A side today.
That's because Bill was answering all these questions as we went through things today. You know,
everybody's out automating. They're already looking at. They're running their data reports and going.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out how they can automate the questions into the Q&A, right? Yes. You know, while we're waiting, while we give a couple more minutes for questions, I do want to bring up what Rachel spoke about earlier. You know, we want to make sure that you're always in tune with the educational events that we've got going on as well. The beautiful part of them is we reach out to the professionals in the workplace. You don't just have to listen to me and Rachel, but you know, what we do have upcoming in the not too distant future here, as Rachel put out, just kind of re-highlighting MSP Business School. Every Tuesday we release that, get that up on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And again, I think I saw Rachel put Bill's episode into the chat. So, you know, grab that link and you can hear some more talk about automation today. Every Wednesday, open coaching, and please send me subjects that you want us to talk about. You know, if there's questions you have both in the tool or in the industry between coaching and our acceleration sessions every Thursday, these are the topics we want to talk about. Coaching really is focused on the tool itself. It's really meant for the MSP customer, VCIOToolbox customers, but anybody's welcome to join because everybody can learn a little something. But we really focus on some of the things within the platform. On Thursdays, we really open up the door to really talking about what's accelerating the MSPs. What are the things that are driving the next generation MSP? And obviously automation is one of those key things. So that's just a re-highlight on some of those. And, you know, I was vamping over here, Rachel, but it doesn't look like any Q&As came in or any additional questions are going on.
I think that the two of you just explained everything so brilliantly.
Well, I'll credit that to Bill. I just try to keep it flowing, right? But all kidding aside, Bill, really appreciate you coming and joining us today. For those attending, we will be getting out replays of this. So if there were things you want to go back to, we will certainly be making sure you get that link. This will be published up to our YouTube channel as well. So certainly you can reference back to it there. And if you're not on that channel, please subscribe. All of our content goes there ultimately. So, you know, anything that you may miss with us can go there. If you want to reach out to Bill, what's the best way that they can reach you?
I'm on LinkedIn, as well as feel free to email me directly, bill@stackadvisors.com. You can find website, contact us, etc. Just like Brian, as we started to engage in the conversation, I love talking automation. I love talking about ways to find it. Love talking about the value and the profit that it can drive. And I'm happy to have a conversation anytime about it.
Awesome. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We do have, were you just posting up everybody the address? Thank you, Rachel.
Oh, yeah.
So you can get Bill's email up there. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Keep your eyes out. We'll be announcing next month's learning series, or I think we're going to change the name to this to master classes, because these guys are also genius out there.
So fancy.
But I think next month we're targeting our friends Rob Rogers and Tim McNeil, who are really going to talk about sales recruiting and, you know, other topics here in 2022. You know, certainly the sales game is changing a little bit, and the account management game is changing as people are starting to return back to office. But really, what's the long tail of what happened during the pandemic, and what are the new things that we need to talk about, and the new ways to sell in this new day and age where nobody sits at their desk behind their phone anymore. So hope you can join us then. We'll be getting that information out. And with that, I'll give everybody back a few minutes of their hour before they head off to their next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
You need to do this. Well, I think we have our other meeting. All right. Sorry, I was just removing attendees, Bill. Thank you so much for joining me today. That was awesome.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
I keep learning more as we go through this too. And you know, it's funny. I was hoping Rachel was going to stay on for a couple more moments, but you guys are practically neighbors. She's in the city over on, I think, on the east side, but I know you're, I think, over in Brooklyn, correct?
Well, I was. I'm actually in Denver now. So I was in Brooklyn forever.
Right. You told me that. You told me that. I'm so sorry.
I moved. So, well, and I think last time we spoke, I probably had either just gotten back from New York, or I was about to go to New York. So that's probably part of why that stuck in there.
Well, I just remember you talking about being in Brooklyn for a while. And I know we had a pre-conversation where we were talking about Pratt, where my daughter was looking at one point. So
yeah.
But no, this was great. You know, Bill, I will. So what I'll be getting to you is just, you know, who some of the people that were that registered today.
Oh, okay.
I'll get you also, you know, I'll get this out and I'll tell you who's interacting with some of our, you know, some of this material, because there were some people that asked for it. And, you know, give you a chance to follow up on that. We'll be promoting this a little bit afterward too. Rachel usually cuts up into a couple sound bites. So, you know, feel free to do with it as you will, but
yeah,
really appreciate
if you send that stuff to Megan, you know, Megan will certainly promote it around our circle as well.
Beautiful, so. Beautiful.
That'd be great.
And certainly if I can help out in any other way, let me know.
Will do. Hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, no, you know, which shows you heading out to this year? Let's kind of go in the next, you know, few months.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird because most, even things like IT Glue, you know, I wanted to get out to that one. I mean, June really seems to be the first one. They're having us go out for Secure as part of the advisory council. So they're going to ask us to. I don't know if I'm going to go to the event because I'm not quite the security guy, but. We'll see. That's probably the first one. I didn't see anything really coming up in April or May.
No, it's interesting. You know, there's a few right now, Connect IT and a couple, you know, Threat Locker just had theirs this week. And you see these ones that are at the smaller vendor, Bill, and, you know, I'll be honest, Bill, you know, as we're still bootstrapping this up, you can only be at so many at the cost when everybody wants, you know, 10 to 30,000 for their booth. So, you know, it looks like we're going to do Secure because we're launching before June. We're taking some of our security components and really building more of a GRC focused product for the MSP set. And along with that will be an incident response capability as well. So,
fantastic.
So we'll be down in Secure.
That's valuable.
Yeah, that's supposed to be our coming out party. You know, we've always had the goal. It's just take some time to get there of making VCIOToolbox really a account management and advisory platform. You know, we're going to handle all the soft skills that go around what all the tools do. So, you know, we just went through a UI UX upgrade, and that'll be getting implemented over the next 8 weeks to really separate things out into a key account module, a TBR module, a GRC module, and an IR module, and really try to help from an advisory standpoint. We've seen our sweet spots, the more mature MSPs, so we're trying to get the
we see the same thing.
Yeah.
And I hate the fact that it takes 8 weeks to roll out UI, right?
No, 8 weeks is when you've actually spent 12 weeks agreeing to what the new UI looks like. Let's be clear, you know. I'm like, it's all of a sudden became a goddamn 6-month enterprise, you know. And like honestly, incident response, I could start selling tomorrow, and I've got all this marketing ready. And you know, my CTO is like, well, you know, we'll have it with the redesign in 4 weeks, so you can launch it then. I go, I can't launch anything with 4 weeks after you're done because I got to take screenshots. I got to build a library of actually how-tos, but more importantly, got to get the word out showing it. But
I got to show people what it is first. Right?
So let's look to link up when you're down at Secure. I know I'll be hitting a couple of the more regional shows too, but you know, certainly love to connect with you live when the first opportunity gets to be. So
it'd be fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
Got it, Bill.
And we'll see you soon, man.
Sounds great. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.